Every 2 years, the Montana Historical Society's State Historic Preservation Office and the Governor's Office honor people and projects that have contributed to the preservation of Montana's historic resources in a significant way. This celebration has always occurred as an in-person event until this year. Unfortunately, issues associated with COVID-19 preclude such a gathering. In lieu of our usual in-person event, the biennial Historic Preservation Awards ceremony will occur through a streamed platform. While not as intimate as in past years, we hope you enjoy the 2021 Historic Preservation Awards ceremony and our recognition of people and places in our great state. Please join us as we acknowledge places listed in the National Register during 2019 and 2020. We shall also recognize outgoing members of the State Preservation Review Board. Lastly, we will present our 4 preservation awards to people or groups who inspire us with their commitment and unrelenting efforts in the preservation field. The National Register is a nationwide list of properties recognized as historically important to a community, region, state, or the country. National Register listing celebrates these properties recognized as significant in our collective history and worthy of preservation. National Register listing may also lead to other opportunities, including heritage tourism, educational programs, special grant funding when available, commercial tax credits for rehabilitation, and other Main Street economic investments. Perhaps the greatest highlight of National Register listing is when owners request and receive their National Register sign. The Montana National Register Interpretive Sign Program is a one-of-a-kind Montana program that has received national attention. Thanks to assistance from a small portion of the state bed tax, all owners of listed properties are eligible to apply for an official interpretive sign by contacting the Montana Historical Society. In 2019 and 2020, Montana listed 29 properties in the National Register of Historic Places. Of these, 19 counties are represented. Properties listed include both privately and publicly owned properties. Some properties stand as well-known local landmarks, such as the Billy Miles and Brothers Grain Elevator, better known as the Teslow in Livingston, or the Canyon Resort Airway Beacon, visible from Interstate 15 south of Dillon. Others reflect the importance of learning to their communities, such as the Kate Fratt Memorial Parochial School in Billings, the Dean School in Dean, or the Dodecagon-styled Heritage Museum in Libby, constructed by volunteers to house their local history. Still, others belie their incredible history by unspeaking walls. Peel away the layers of history associated with the Frederick and Josephine Bottler House and find stories of the early days of professional hunting and guiding in Park County and nearby Yellowstone Park. Similarly, the Stark House in Missoula County holds the workspace of local, noted craftsman and woodcarver John Stark. These are merely a few of the stories that follow. Enjoy, and yes, you may applaud when your property is presented.
The Andrus Hotel. When sheep rancher Harry Andrus hired Seattle architect Jesse Warren to design a thoroughly modern hotel, he said, "I made my money in Beaverhead County, and I want to build a hotel in Dillon. The best is none too good for Beaverhead County people." The result was this elegant Renaissance Revival style hotel, which opened in 1918.
Canyon Resort Airway Beacon. Sitting above Pipe Organ Rock, the Canyon Resort Airway Beacon served as part of the National Park's airway route between Salt Lake City and Great Falls. The beacon played a major role in safe nighttime airway navigation, beginning with its construction in 1935.
The Dillon City Hall. This small historic district shows the growth of Dillon city government. The grandest of the 4 buildings is the 1914 City Hall. designed by Bozeman architect Fred F. Wilson in the dignified Romanesque Revival style. It housed a variety of municipal functions, including city offices, the fire and police departments, the jail, and a public auditorium.
Henneberry Homestead. An 1883 cabin, 1905 house, a barn, chicken coop, ice house, and the remains of other structures and machinery convey a sense of homestead life in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Farmed by William and Mary Henneberry, it is one of the best preserved examples of an early homestead in Beaverhead County.
St. Paul's Mission Church. After a fire in 1931 destroyed its 1898 stone church, the Jesuit missionaries to the Fort Belknap Reservation organized to rebuild. German immigrant and stonemason Thomas Flash used locally quarried sandstone to build the Romanesque Revival Church, completing the project in 1936 with the help of volunteer labor provided by the primarily Gros-Ventre congregation.
Cow Creek Skirmish Historic District. The approximately 992-acre Cow Creek Skirmish Historic District lies in the spectacular and rugged Cow Creek Canyon within today's Upper Missouri River Breaks National Monument. The canyon is the location of an 1877 running engagement between the Nez Perce Warriors and a 36-member civilian volunteer force led by U.S. Army Major Guido Ilges, as the Nez Perce reached their last stretch of their flight toward refuge in Canada.
The Cow Island Landing Skirmish Site. A skirmish at this site, which served as a steamboat freight depot, gained the 5 non-treaty Nez Perce band supplies that lost them valuable time as they fled to the Canadian border with the hopes of finding refuge in Canada. As such, it is a key site in the interpretation of the Nez Perce War of 1877.
Valley Masonic Lodge No. 21. Founded in 1875, Valley Lodge No. 21 met in rented spaces until after World War II, when they built this minimal traditional style temple designed by Helena architect Herbert Jacobson. Contractors, working with Masonic volunteers, completed the building for $30,000, using up-to-date materials that exemplified post-war vernacular architecture. Dedicated in 1948, the temple served Lodge 21 until 2017.
The Sage Creek Ranger Station. The Sage Creek Ranger Station, which includes a section constructed in 1892 as a cattle and horse ranch line cabin, stands as one of the 4 original stations established on the nascent 1908 Beartooth National Forest. It remains the earliest administrative building in the Pryor Mountains, still in use.
Monarch Depot Historic District. Built in 1901 to replace the 1891 station after it burned, the Craftsman-style depot housed a freight and baggage room, a ticket office, a passenger waiting room, and living quarters for the station master. A double outhouse, one of the few Great Northern privies still standing, and a drover caboose complete the district.
Glens Dam Historic District. The ruins of Glens Dam represents a rare 19th century example of a Montana earthen dam used for industrial processing. Additionally, the ruins are vivid reminders of Anaconda's early rise to prominence as a major ore processing center. Completed in 1884, the dam provided the power for the upper and lower works smelters until 1902.
Glacier Park Women's Club. Constructed in 1933 by the Indian Division of the Civilian Conservation Corps, this rustic-style building reflects the significance of the Women's Club movement. The East Glacier Women's Club used the building for both community library and as a meeting hall. The building continues to serve both functions today.
The Whitetail Airway Beacon. Sitting at the summit of an unnamed mountain overlooking the Whitetail Valley and Little Whitetail Creek, the Whitetail Airway Beacon was one of several beacons that afforded Montana aviators safe navigation across western Montana since 1935. In 1966, the Whitetail Airway Beacon became one of 12 beacons that comprised the Montana Beacon System.
Homestake Airway Beacon. Erected in 1935 and standing on the Jefferson and Silver County line, the homestake airway beacon was a part of a historic system of lighted beacons that provided guidance to aircraft pilots as they flew both north-south and east-west across Montana during the nighttime.
The lyman-neel residence. The lyman-neel house and its owners reflect how North Rodney Street changed from Helena's most fashionable area in 1873, when the home was built, to a mixed-income neighborhood. The free classic-style residence became a boarding house in 1882. Later residents included African-American businesswoman Alice Palmer and future Governor Sam Ford and his family.
Quinn's Garage. In 1916, blacksmith and mechanic Frank Quinn constructed this cast concrete building around a smaller blacksmith shop built here circa 1899. In addition to working as a blacksmith, Quinn repaired cars and horse-drawn and motorized farm implements. Thus, the new building had tall roof trusses and oversized wooden swinging doors to make it easier to accommodate oversized agricultural equipment.
The Silver City Cemetery. Simple, mostly unadorned grave markers are all that remain of Silver City, whose roots date to the 1850s. The small transportation hub, mining community, and one-time county seat primarily served farm and ranch families during the 1880s and 1890s. The town itself has since faded away, leaving the still active cemetery to preserve the legacies of the families buried there.
The Heritage Museum. This unusual 12-sided building is a tribute to Libby's community spirit and commitment to history. Built to commemorate the U.S. bicentennial and house the collections of local artist Roy Porter, the log structure, which was designed and constructed almost entirely by volunteer labor, also celebrates the region's forests and logging roots.
The Pugsley Bridge. In 1950, after the 1914 bridge was destroyed by an ice jam, civil engineer Thomas W. Hurdle designed a unique cable-stayed system to provide a clear span over the Marias River, a river notorious for ice jams damaging bridge structures. It is one of the few and possibly the only bridge of this unique design in the United States.
The Stark House. Built in 1939, John and Marie Stark's rustic-style log cabin was built to last. An expert craftsman, John completed much of the work himself using hand tools. The house doubled as the couple's workshop, where John carved wood sculptures and crafted log furniture, which Marie upholstered. Many of their original pieces still furnish the house.
The Billy Miles and Brother Grain Elevator. The 1906 Billy Miles and Brother Grain Elevator is an intact and well-preserved example of an ironclad wood elevator. The elevator served as a shipment point for agricultural production in the Livingston area for over 100 years, linking grain producers from the surrounding farming region with outside markets.
The Frederick and Josephine Bottler House. A commercial hunter and avid explorer who served as guide and hunter for the 1872 Hayden expedition, Fred Bottler built this 1904 free classic Queen Anne-style home on ranch land he claimed in 1868. His fifth documented residence on the ranch, the first was a primitive bachelor shanty, it reflects the evolution of both Park County and this early settler family.
The Howard Lepper Memorial Hall. After their 1921 community hall burned in 1926, Flat Willow residents began rebuilding, hosting their first dance 3 months later. The new hall, named like the original, after a Winnet banker who died in the 1918 influenza pandemic, wasn't fully finished until 1929. The Craftsman-style hall continues to serve as a welcoming place for celebrations, gatherings, and public events.
The James McCrossan Cabin. Built by Canadian-born immigrant teamster and farm worker James McCrossan in 1908, this two-room cabin represents the many hand-built log structures used as temporary residences by Montana's rural families. Unusual for a rustic cabin is the interior molding and trim, likely manufactured at a local mill. The cabin is also noteworthy for its extended gable roof, present not just off one gable, but both.
The Silverbow Airway Beacon. Standing sentinel atop a peak in the Boulder Mountains and overlooking Silverbow Creek Valley, the 1937 constructed Silverbow Airway Beacon functioned as a critical component of the northern transcontinental airway route cutoff between Three Forks and Gold Creek. Its role in Montana aviation history allowed for safe nighttime navigation of aircraft across the mountains of Montana.
Dean School. After a 1914 fire gutted the 1894 dimly lit log cabin where Dean children attended school, the community rallied to build a new school with high ceilings, tall windows, and attached teacherage. The school, which closed in 1967, is now used for community events. A full rehabilitation in 2018 returned the Dean School to its original appearance.
Stillwater County Courthouse. The Stillwater County Courthouse was one of 26 counties established between 1910 and 1920 in an effort to make government more accessible to the people. Billings architect Warren A. Diedrich designed this neoclassical style brick courthouse to remain a symbol of civic pride and reflect the community's commitment to democratic ideals, law, and justice.
Fratt Link House. Businessman David Fratt and philanthropist wife Kate built this Queen Anne free classic style residence in 1899. 23 years later, noted architect John G. Link moved the three-story home to its current location. Members of the Link family continued to occupy the residence until 2000, preserving not just the exterior but the home's exceptionally well-crafted interior.
The Kate Fratt Memorial Parochial School. Montana's most prominent architectural firm, Link & Hare, designed the school in 1918-1919. Benefactor Kate Fratt underwrote the cost to build the Renaissance Revival-style school, which is finished with a collegiate Gothic-style front bay. The school continuously served the children of the Catholic community of Billings and vicinity for almost 100 years.
The Montana State Preservation Review Board is a 9-member board appointed by the governor. Their duties include the review and approval of National Register documentation, the review of appeals to National Register nominations, providing written opinions on the significance of properties, the review of completed state historic preservation plans, and providing general advice and professional recommendations to state agencies and the State Historic Preservation Office on the stewardship of heritage properties. This year, we acknowledge 3 retiring review board members.
Deborah Ronick. Deborah Ronick of Red Lodge served on the State Historic Preservation Review Board from November 2011 through September 2019. A Montana native, Deb attended Eastern Montana College, concentrating in education and library science. Deb received her certification for library science from Metro State College, recertification for the state of California, and completed her certification for the state of Montana Public Library Directors. For over 13 years, Deb worked as the librarian at the Corona Fundamental Intermediate and Rainey Intermediate Schools in Corona, California. She and her husband returned to Montana in 2005. In 2007, Deb became the library director at the Joliet Public Library. Her interest in history and preservation came to the fore at this time, as she served for several years as the Historic Preservation Officer for Carbon County. In this role, Deb promoted the county's historic resources. She attended county planning and design review meetings as she strove to retain the historic fabric of the county. She generated new nominations of properties eligible for listing in the National Register. Her time as the Historic Preservation Officer led her to serving on the Montana State Preservation Review Board, an appointment appreciated by all who served with her. With Deb's library background and knowledge of history, the National Register nominations presented to the board during her time reflected her keen eye toward clean and accurate bibliographies and footnotes. To Deb, we thank you for your time on the board, your long drives from Red Lodge to attend meetings across the state, often with navigator Galen in tow, and for your continued quest of preservation across our state.
Dr. Tim Urbaniak. Dr. Tim Urbaniak of Billings served on the State Historic Preservation Review Board from November 2011 through September 2019. Tim received his bachelor's degree in liberal studies and multimedia technology from Montana State University Billings in 1998, his master's degree in public relations from MSU Billings in 2002, and his doctorate in anthropology from the University of Montana in Missoula in 2014. From 1994 to 2000, he served as Technical Operations Chair at MSU Billings and the Construction, Drafting and Design and Welding Department Chair in 2014. His work with 3D scanning has provided additional and invaluable information on many rock art sites in the region. Because preparing an NR nomination is not a requirement to serve on the review board, many appointees never engage in that pursuit. Prior to Tim's appointment to the review board, he too had never written a National Register nomination. In 2015, Tim prepared his first nomination for McMullen Hall on the MSU Billings campus. A nomination for Medicine's Rock State Park soon followed, and a nomination for the Everson Creek Archaeological District is in progress. Tim also greatly contributed to the board's biennial reports on the stewardship of state-owned properties and served 2 years as the board's chairperson. For all you do and all you did, we sincerely thank you, Dr. Tim Urbaniak, for your service on the State Historic Preservation Review Board.
C. Milo McLeod. C. Milo McLeod served on the board from October of 2012 through September of 2020. A native of Kirkland, Washington, Milo began his studies at the University of New Mexico in 1965, then served in the U.S. Army as an airborne infantryman in Germany and Vietnam from 1968 to 1970. He resumed his studies at UNM and received his bachelor's degree in 1972. In 1975, Milo began working for the Lolo National Forest as an engineering technician, and shortly thereafter as an archaeologist under the forest's newly established Cultural Resource Program. He received his master's degree from the University of Montana in 1984. For the next 34 years, he managed the Lolo's Heritage Resource Program. During this time, Milo worked closely with the cultural committees of several Native American tribes, including the Salish, Kootenai, and Nez Perce. Milo's development of cultural programs and volunteerism includes Passport in Time, with a significant focus on historical homesteads along Rock Creek, coordination for Friends of the Upper Rock Creek, cultural and natural resource assessments for the Army Environmental Center, the Missoula County Resource Advisory Committee, the Powell, Granite, Deer Lodge Resource Advisory Committee, the Montana Preservation Alliance, and Friends of the Historical Museum at Fort Missoula. He also continued to serve his country through membership in the Montana Army National Guard and the U.S. Army Reserve, finally retiring in 2005. Despite not being able to properly thank you for your service on the board due to your last meeting being conducted via Zoom due to COVID-19, we earnestly extend our thanks and gratitude for your insight, experience, and wry humor.
Every 2 years, the Historical Society and the SHPO solicit recommendations from across the state for individuals, civic groups, and projects that represent outstanding examples of dedication and perseverance in historic preservation. This year, we're honored to present 4 such awards.
The Northwest Montana Lookout Association. Many outside organizations have stepped forward to assist governmental agencies faced with continued decrease of federal monies to properly care for buildings and structures under their purview. Realizing the perilous position of lookouts across the nation, the Forest Fire Lookout Association, the FFLA, organized in 1990 as an international nonprofit organization to consistently advocate for forest fire lookouts. The many roles of the FFLA include encouraging public involvement in the preservation of lookouts, providing grants for lookout projects, and documenting and researching lookouts. Under the umbrella of the FFLA are local chapters in nearly every state, including the Northwest Montana chapter. The Northwest Montana chapter of the Forest Fire Lookout Association has advocated for these unique and endangered resources since their chapter formation in 2013. Perhaps the FFLA and the Montana's chapter's greatest contribution is the extensive volunteer work they contribute to restore historic forest fire lookouts. In 2020 alone, the chapter completed projects on national forest land, national park land, and state land, with volunteers providing in-kind contributions of $63,000. This included more than 23 hours of volunteer labor in a year highlighted by the presence of COVID-19 and the use of personal protective gear to complete the projects. Projects undertaken in 2019 and 2020 include an historic window restoration workshop at the Murphy Lake Ranger Station, where windows were prepped for transport to the Mount Wham Lookout for installation. Work on the Meadow Peak Lookout for eventual placement on the Forest Service rental program also occurred, as did the continued multi-year restoration project at the Mud Lake Lookout in the Bob Marshall Wilderness area. In addition, the group undertook restoration efforts on the Mount Brown Lookout and extremely difficult to reach Heavens Peak Lookout in Glacier National Park. Preservation often feels like a thankless job, especially in those cases where the resource is not easily accessed and stands away from a well-traveled thoroughfare. The usually remote locations and high altitudes associated with lookouts often also pose logistical challenges toward their preservation. So, to the Northwest Montana chapter of the Forest Fire Lookout Association, we wish to convey an emphatic thank you for their dedicated efforts toward the preservation of these watchmen of the woods in Montana.
Constructed in 1901 to replace an earlier depot consumed by fire, the Monarch Depot operated until its 1945 closure by the Great Northern Railroad, when the run proved financially unviable. The Monarch Depot offered services to both travelers and freighters, especially the local mines. The Monarch Depot also welcomed specialty trains that ran the tracks, including the annual Fish Train, which operated from 1914 to 1919 and catered to anglers and sportsmen. The Montana Department of Transportation acquired the depot within 2 years of its closure, converting the building into a garage and machine shed. MDT ownership resulted in 2 large bay entries being cut into the walls of the siding and encapsulating the whole building in corrugated metal. In 2013, Cascade County acquired the Monarch Depot and bestowed it to the Monarch-Neihart Historical Group, Incorporated. The group obtained grants from the Great Northern Railway Historical Society, Three Rivers Communications, Northwestern Energy, and 3 in succeeding years from the Montana History Foundation. They soon began the impressive task of bringing the depot back to its former glory, salvaging as many of the original materials as possible. They replaced the failing cedar shingle roof and poured a new concrete foundation. Unsalvageable or missing wall sections were replaced in kind with drop siding. The group replaced the wood windows and freight doors in kind and reconstructed the interior layout, following original 1899 Great Northern Railway plans for freight and passenger depots. The Monarch-Neihart Historical Group consulted the SHPO nearly every step of the way of this long process. The dedicated efforts of the Monarch-Neihart Historical Group allow the Monarch Depot to once again welcome people to the town of Monarch. While some viewed the depot as a hopeless cause, the vision of the Monarch-Neihart Historic Group to recapture the past grandeur of the depot never wavered. The group's desire to save a vital part of their local history spurred them forward.
The 2019 Legislature and the Montana Museums Act of 2020. The 2019 Montana State Legislature passed a historic bill that will prove transformational for Montana and those who treasure its history. Championed by State Senators Terry Gauthier and Jill Konauer and Representative Julie Dooling, Senate Bill 338, known as Montana Museums Act of 2020, passed 58 to 40 in the final hours of the 2019 legislative session on April 24th. Attempts to fund the construction of a new Montana Historical Society building began over a decade ago. As the oldest historical organization in the West, founded in 1865, the Montana Historical Society assumed a number of functions through its history, including its designation as the official state archives. As the years rolled by, the need for a new historical society building assumed greater magnitude as the world-class collections it houses continued to grow. The Montana Museums Act of 2020 increased the statewide accommodations tax from 3% to 4% and applies to hotel rooms and campgrounds. Often called a bed tax as it targets tourists who often visit Montana for its history and beauty, the act directs a portion of the tax to pay for the new home for the Montana Historical Society. The act not only benefited the creation of a new heritage center, it also created a grant program to fund preservation of historical sites and museums statewide. The call for applications for these funds in 2020 yielded an incredible response from across the state for preservation projects. A few of these projects seeking funding included the Crowley Block in Lewistown, the Dion Block in Glendive, and the Yucca Theater in Hysham. To the 2019 Legislature for their forward-thinking investment in Montana's heritage, from all of us who treasure our history, thank you.
The 2021 Governor's Award goes to the Veterans Affairs staff who facilitated the Freedom's Path project at Fort Harrison. Their work helped to preserve 11 of the fort's National Registry properties while providing housing to those who need it. For years, Fort Harrison VA staff faced a difficult decision of what to do with the fort's unoccupied residential buildings from the 1890s. Although these grand, multi-unit houses were home to military and VA staff for a century, their upkeep was expensive. Fortunately, the VA's commitment to end homelessness amongst veterans gave these buildings a new purpose. Through the work of the VA staff, Freedom's Path was created to provide 26 residential units for veterans and their families. The staff set the stage for this project. Their work maintained the dignity of these great buildings and repurposed them to serve a greater need. Now the campus is home to 96 veterans and their families who live in stable, positive, and therapeutic environment in the company of veteran peers. Thank you for your dedication to this project, and congratulations.